How We Decide by Jonah Lehrer. Imagine you're flying a Boeing 737 into Tokyo. 7,000 feet up, the city glimmers ahead like scattered diamonds. Then everything goes wrong. Alarms start screaming. Red lights explode across the cockpit. Your left engine has just turned into a fireball. Your heart's hammering so hard you can feel it in your throat. You're fighting the panic, trying to remember the emergency checklist. Cut the fuel, kill the power. But it doesn't work. The plane starts tilting hard, the evening sky spinning sideways. You're pulling on the controls, but it feels like wrestling an invisible giant. Then you feel it. That sickening shudder. A stall. The air's moving too slowly over the wings. The whole aircraft starts making this awful groaning sound, like metal screaming. And you know exactly what it means. Physics is winning. If you don't do something right now, you're going down. You've got two choices, and about half a second to pick one. Option 1, push the throttle up. Try to climb, gain some speed, circle around, and stabilize. But what if your one good engine can't handle it? What if it fails too? Option 2, do something that feels completely insane. Point the nose down, aim at the ground on purpose. It's a fake dive to avoid a real one, might give you just enough speed to regain control. Or it might send you into a death spiral so intense the plane breaks apart before it even hits the ground. So what do? Sweat stinging your eyes. The shudder's getting worse. You make your choice. You push the yoke forward and hold your breath. This actually happened to author Jonah Lehrer. And in that terrifying split second, he managed to save the plane. He wrestled it back under control with just 2,000 feet to spare, and brought it down rough, but safe. Only after he landed, hands still shaking and heart still racing, did he notice something weird. He wasn't looking through a real cockpit window. He was staring at a $16 million flight simulator screen. The whole thing was a test. When he tried it again and made the other choice, tried to gain altitude, the plane stalled, rolled left, and crashed into the city in a ball of fire. Life or death came down to a single decision made in pure panic. And here's the thing, he didn't reason his way through it. There was no time to calculate aerodynamics or run the numbers. It was pure gut feeling, pure intuition. And for centuries we've been told that's exactly the wrong way to make decisions. Today we're diving into a fascinating book called How We Decide by Jonah Lehrer. This isn't your typical decision-making guide. It's a deep dive into the human brain, into the hidden war that happens every time you make a choice. What if our best decisions aren't purely rational? What if our worst mistakes come from thinking too much? By the end, you'll understand the secret partnership between reason and emotion, and you'll walk away with a powerful new way to make better choices in your own life. For thousands of years, we've told ourselves a simple story about decision-making. It started with the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, and it goes like this. The human mind is a chariot. The charioteer is reason, calm, logical, in control. He's holding the reins to two powerful horses, our emotions. One horse is well-behaved, representing positive feelings. But the other horse is wild, destructive, and completely uncontrollable. It represents our darker impulses. Plato said the rational charioteer's job is to whip that dark horse into submission and keep the chariot moving forward. This idea that reason should be the master and emotion the dangerous beast to be tamed has dominated Western thinking for centuries. From philosopher Descartes, who wanted to purge the mind of all illogical feelings, to Sigmund Freud, who saw the rational ego as a rider trying to control the wild id, the message has always been the same. To make a good decision, be logical. Silence your feelings. There's just one problem with this ancient story. It's completely wrong. And we know this because of a man named Eliot. In 1982, Eliot was living the dream. Model husband, successful corporate manager. Then a small brain tumor near his frontal lobe changed everything. The surgery to remove it went perfectly, but something went terribly wrong. Eliot's intelligence was untouched. He still tested in the 97th percentile. He could think logically and analyze problems beautifully, but he was now completely unable to make a decision. Simple tasks became impossible. He'd spend hours agonizing over which pen to use, blue or black. Choosing a restaurant for lunch became an all-day ordeal as he meticulously analyzed every menu, every seating arrangement, every lighting scheme, but could never actually decide where to eat. His life fell apart, he got fired. His wife left him, he ended up moving back in with his parents. Neurologist Antonio Damasio, who studied Eliot, was baffled. According to Plato's model, Eliot should have been the perfect decision-maker. His charioteer was intact, but his emotional horses were gone. Damasio discovered that after surgery, Eliot had become a man without feelings. When shown pictures of severed feet or houses on fire, his body showed zero emotional response. He felt nothing. And that was the problem. Eliot's tragedy revealed a profound truth: a brain that can't feel, can't decide. Far from being a distraction, our emotions are crucial and indispensable to decision-making. Reason without emotion is powerless. Think about quarterback Tom Brady standing in the pocket with just seconds before a 300-pound linebacker crushes him. He has to scan the field, track multiple moving receivers, read the defense, and decide where to throw, all in an instant. He's not solving a math problem. He doesn't have time to analyze every variable consciously. He's relying on something else. As Brady himself says, you just feel like you're going to the right place. And that's where I throw it. That feeling isn't random. It's the output of an incredibly powerful supercomputer, the emotional brain. The part of our mind refined over hundreds of millions of years of evolution. It operates beneath conscious awareness, processing millions of data points in parallel. When Brady glances at a receiver and gets a slight twinge of fear, that's his brain telling him the pass is too risky. The linebacker's presence has been translated into a negative feeling. When he sees another receiver streaking across the middle and feels a subtle burst of positive emotion, that's his brain saying, "That's the one." Every feeling is a data summary. It's a visceral shortcut that lets us make complex decisions quickly and effectively. So how does this system work? How does the brain generate these wise feelings? The answer lies in a tiny molecule called dopamine. For a long time, scientists thought dopamine was just the pleasure chemical, and it is. When you eat chocolate cake or hear your favorite song, your dopamine system makes you feel happy. But neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz discovered dopamine neurons are much more than that. They're prediction machines. In his famous experiments, Schultz would sound a tone, then a few seconds later squirt apple juice into a monkey's mouth. At first, the monkey's dopamine neurons fired only when the juice arrived, the actual reward. But after a few trials, something amazing happened. The neurons started firing at the tone, not the juice. The brain had learned to anticipate the future. Dopamine neurons weren't just reacting to pleasure, they were predicting it. This system runs constantly in the background, learning the world's patterns. It figures out that dark clouds predict rain, that smiles predict friendship, and that red lights predict you should stop. But here's where it gets really interesting. The system learns by paying attention to its mistakes. Schultz found that if he played the tone but didn't deliver the juice, the dopamine neurons would suddenly stop firing. This created what scientists call a prediction error signal. It's the brain saying, "Hey, I was wrong about that, pay attention." That feeling of surprise, whether disappointment or delight, is one of our most powerful learning tools. Nothing focuses the mind like the unexpected. This brings us to one of the book's most dramatic stories. It's early morning, February 24, 1991, during the Persian Gulf War. Lieutenant Commander Michael Riley is monitoring a radar screen on a British destroyer, protecting Allied ships. It's been an exhausting shift, and his eyes are bloodshot from staring at blinking green dots. Suddenly, a new blip appears off Kuwait's coast. It's heading straight for the American battleship, the USS Missouri. Immediately, Riley feels a surge of fear. His pulse races. His hands get clammy. Something's wrong with this blip. But here's the problem. The radar trace looks exactly like a friendly American A-6 fighter jet returning from a mission. It's flying at the same speed, with a similar radar signature. The A-6 pilots often turn off their identification systems to avoid Iraqi missiles, so there's no way to contact the aircraft. Riley has less than a minute to decide. If it's an Iraqi missile and he does nothing, hundreds of sailors die. If it's an American jet and he shoots it down, he's killed 2 innocent pilots. He stares at the screen, watching the blip get closer. Time's up. He can't explain why, but his gut is screaming this is a threat. He trusts his feeling. Fire 2 sea darts, he orders. The missiles launch. Seconds later, they intercept the target, which explodes and falls into the sea just 700 yards in front of the USS Missouri. Later, investigators confirmed it was indeed an Iraqi Silkworm missile. Riley had saved the battleship. But how did he know? Even he couldn't explain it. Years later, cognitive psychologist Gary Klein analyzed the radar tapes. He discovered a tiny, almost imperceptible discrepancy. American A-6 jets always appeared on radar after a single sweep. But because the Silkworm missile flew much lower, its signal was masked briefly by ground interference. It didn't become visible until the third radar sweep, just 8 seconds later than a friendly jet would. Riley's conscious mind didn't notice this. But his dopamine neurons, which had spent weeks learning the pattern of returning A-6s, certainly did. The 8-second delay created a prediction error. That fear was his brain's alarm circuit firing, warning him something was dangerously different. His emotions knew the truth long before his rational mind did. This is the incredible power of the emotional brain. Through experience and practice, it can develop astonishingly wise intuition. Bill Roberty, world champion in backgammon, chess, and poker, describes this perfectly. He says the key to his success isn't just playing a lot, it's the quality of his practice. After every single game, win or lose, he painstakingly reviews his mistakes. He knows self-criticism is the secret to self-improvement. He's deliberately training his dopamine neurons, teaching them to recognize success patterns. But our feelings aren't perfect. Relying on them at the wrong time can lead to disaster. The same system that makes us brilliant can also make us fools. This is emotion's dark side. Let me introduce you to Anne Klinstiver. At 52, she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, caused by the death of dopamine neurons in the brain. Her doctor put her on a drug that mimics dopamine, and at first it was miraculous. Her tremors disappeared. But then she discovered slot machines. Anne had never gambled before, but with her brain flooded with artificial dopamine, slots became irresistible. Why? Because while our dopamine system enjoys predictable rewards, it gets even more excited by surprising rewards. A slot machine is the ultimate source of unpredictable rewards. Because payouts are random, our dopamine neurons can never figure out the pattern. They keep getting surprised, and instead of getting bored, they become obsessed. For Anne, whose brain was already overstimulated with dopamine, this was a recipe for disaster. The surprising rewards triggered massive chemical bliss, making the games excessively seductive. She lost over $250,000, exhausted her retirement savings, and sold everything she owned. She was an addict, completely hijacked by a flaw in her emotional brain. This flaw affects all of us, even without medication. It's why we see patterns where none exist. Take the hot hand in basketball. We've all seen it. A player makes a few shots in a row, and we're convinced they can't miss. Announcers talk about them being in the zone. Psychologists Amos Tversky and Thomas Gilovich decided to test this. They analyzed years of statistics from the Philadelphia 76ers and found absolutely no evidence of the hot hand. A player's chance of making a shot was completely independent of their previous shot. The streaks were just our imagination, our pattern-seeking brains imposing order on random noise. This same flaw makes us terrible investors. The stock market is largely random. But our dopamine neurons are convinced they can solve it. We see a stock go up for a few days and perceive a trend, convinced we found a secret pattern. This leads to financial bubbles. Our greedy brains become so convinced they've solved the market that they take bigger and bigger risks right before it all crashes. And then there's perhaps the most powerful emotional flaw of all: loss aversion. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky discovered that for the human brain, the pain of a loss is approximately twice as potent as the pleasure of a gain. In other words, losing $20 feels twice as bad as finding $20 feels good. This simple defect explains so many irrational choices. It's why contestants on Deal or No Deal make terrible decisions. Analysis found that after a player suffers a big loss, say eliminating the $1 million briefcase, they become excessively risk-seeking. The pain of that loss is so intense they can't think straight. They reject perfectly fair offers from the banker, desperately chasing a big win to erase the feeling of loss, and often end up losing everything. Loss aversion also makes us hold onto losing stocks far too long. Selling a stock that's gone down makes the loss tangible and painful. So we postpone the pain, hoping it'll recover, and our portfolio slowly fills with losing investments. The emotional brain is also dangerously short-sighted. It's built to overvalue immediate rewards at the expense of future consequences. This is why credit cards are so dangerous. Paying with cash involves actual, tangible loss. Your wallet gets lighter. It triggers a small pain signal in the brain, but paying with a credit card is abstract. It anesthetizes the brain against payment pain. The insula, a brain region associated with negative feelings, doesn't react. And so our desire for immediate gratification, the new shoes, the expensive dinner, wins the argument every time. We buy what we can't afford, telling ourselves we'll figure out payment later. This is the essence of the famous marshmallow test. A 4-year-old is given a choice: 1 marshmallow now, or 2 if they can wait 15 minutes. Most can't resist. Their emotional brains scream for the immediate reward. But those few who can wait, who can use their rational minds to control impulses, go on to have much more successful lives. They get better grades, earn higher SAT scores, and are less likely to have behavioral problems. They've mastered the art of self-control. So if our emotions can be so wise but also so foolish, what are we supposed to do? This is where the other part of our mind comes in, the rational brain, the charioteer. Its home is the prefrontal cortex, the part right behind your forehead. This is the newest part of our brain evolutionarily, and it gives us the ability to think logically, analyze problems, and control our impulses. The story of Wag Dodge, a smoke jumper in 1949, perfectly illustrates its power. Dodge and his crew were dispatched to fight a small fire in a Montana gulch. But the fire suddenly exploded, turning into an inferno, racing toward them at 30 miles per hour. The men's primal emotions screamed one thing: run! So they dropped their heavy gear and started scrambling up the brutally steep canyon wall. But Dodge, a veteran firefighter, quickly realized it was hopeless. The fire was too fast, the hill too steep. His fear told him to run, but his experience told him running meant certain death. In that moment, panic narrows our thoughts. It reduces awareness to the most basic instinct: flee the fire. This is what happened to Dodge's men. They became fixated on reaching the ridge, even though it was impossible. But Dodge did something different. He stopped running. He resisted his primal urge. He turned to his conscious mind, the only part of the brain capable of creative, deliberate thought. And in a flash of insight, he came up with something no one had ever done before. He took out a match, lit the grass in front of him, and created a small escape fire. As the new flames raced away from him up the hill, he stepped into the smoldering ashes, a thin buffer of burned land. He lay down, covered his mouth with a wet handkerchief, and waited for the wall of flames to pass over him. He survived, virtually unscathed. 13 of his men, who followed their instincts, were killed. Dodge's story shows the power of the rational brain in a novel crisis. When our experience and intuition are useless, when we face a problem we've never seen before, we must rely on our reason. This is what Captain Al Haynes and his crew did on United Flight 232, when a catastrophic engine failure destroyed all 3 hydraulic systems, leaving them with no way to control the aircraft. The situation was unprecedented. There was no procedure for it. Their trained instincts were useless. But Haynes stayed calm, thought through the problem, and came up with a crazy but brilliant idea: steer the massive plane using only thrust from its two remaining engines. It was an incredible feat of rational problem-solving that saved 184 lives. But just as emotions have a dark side, so does reason. And the biggest danger of the rational brain is thinking too much. Psychologist Timothy Wilson conducted a simple experiment. He had college students taste and rank 5 different brands of strawberry jam. Their preferences closely mirrored those of trained food experts at Consumer Reports. It seems we're all natural jam experts. Our emotional brains instinctively know what tastes best. But then Wilson repeated the experiment with a twist. This time, he asked a new group of students to explain why they preferred one jam over another. He forced them to consciously analyze their first impressions. The results were shocking. All that extra analysis warped their judgment. The students now preferred the jam that experts had ranked as one of the worst. Their correlation with expert rankings plummeted from a respectable 0.55 to a virtually non-existent 0.11. What happened? When we overthink a decision like this, our rational brain starts searching for reasons. We focus on variables that are easy to verbalize, like chunkiness or spreadability, even if we don't actually care about them. Having a chunky texture sounds like a plausible reason to dislike jam, so we talk ourselves into believing it, ignoring the pure, holistic feeling of pleasure our emotional brain provides. When you overthink at the wrong moment, you cut yourself off from the wisdom of your emotions. You lose the ability to know what you really want, and you end up choosing the worst strawberry jam. This isn't just about jam, it happens with big decisions too. People overthink buying a house and focus on easily quantifiable facts like square footage, while undervaluing how they'll actually feel during a long daily commute. The rational prefrontal cortex is powerful, but it's also limited. Psychologist George Miller famously showed that our conscious brain can only handle about 7 pieces of information at any one time. When we give it too much data, it gets overwhelmed. This is why more information isn't always better. The flood of detail from an MRI scan often leads doctors to focus on minor spinal abnormalities that aren't actually causing a patient's back pain, resulting in unnecessary and ineffective surgeries. They'd make better decisions with less information. So we have a mind with 2 powerful competing systems. An emotional brain that's fast, intuitive, and wise from experience, but also prone to biases and short-sightedness, and a rational brain that's slow, deliberate, and creative, but easily overwhelmed and prone to overanalysis. How do we decide which one to use? This brings us to the final lesson, perfectly embodied by the game of poker. Michael Binger is a particle physicist with a PhD from Stanford. He's also a professional poker player who's won millions. He represents the synthesis of these 2 ways of thinking. Poker is a game of math. It's about calculating odds and probabilities. When Binger started out, he relied on his analytical skills, playing only hands with the best statistical odds. This is the rational brain at work, and it's essential for avoiding big mistakes. But poker is also an art. It's a game of people. Math can't tell you if your opponent is bluffing. It can't capture the subtle psychological tells, the shift in posture, the slight eye twitch. For that, you need your emotional brain. You need to rely on those inexplicable hunches that come from experience. Binger's journey to becoming a top player was about learning to master both sides of the game. He learned when to do the math and when to trust his gut. He realized the best decision-makers don't rely on a single strategy. They're like a fox who knows many things, not a hedgehog who knows only one big thing. The best decision-makers are flexible. They're willing to listen to the argument inside their own heads. They think about how they think. So what does this all mean for you and me? The central lesson of how we decide is that there's no universal solution to making good choices. Our brains aren't a single machine. They're a team of rivals. We have the ancient, powerful, and often brilliant emotional brain, and we have the newer, more deliberate and creative rational brain. The secret to good decision-making is knowing which part of your mind to consult for which problem. It's like having a toolbox. You wouldn't use a sledgehammer to fix a wristwatch, and you wouldn't use a tiny screwdriver to break down a wall. You have to use the right tool for the job. So let's make this practical. Here are a few simple guidelines from the book you can start using today. First, for simple problems, use your reason. If you're choosing between two virtually identical vegetable peelers and one's half the price, don't listen to your emotions, which might be swayed by fancy packaging. Do the simple math. The rational brain is excellent for these clear-cut, quantifiable decisions. This is also why you should use it to defend yourself against your emotional brain's innate flaws, like loss aversion. Before you make a risky bet or reject a fair offer after a loss, take a moment. Step back, run the numbers. Second, for complex problems, trust your emotions. This is the most counterintuitive lesson. When you're making a big, complicated choice, which car to buy, which house to live in, or even which person to spend your life with, the sheer amount of information will overwhelm your rational brain. It'll force you to oversimplify, to focus on one or two variables, while ignoring dozens of others. Your emotional brain, however, can process all that information unconsciously. The best strategy is to gather all the data with your conscious mind, but then give yourself time to let it digest. Go for a walk. Sleep on it. Distract yourself. Then listen to what your gut tells you. The feeling that emerges isn't a whim. It's the result of an incredibly powerful computation. Third, for novel problems, go back to reason. If you find yourself in a situation you've never encountered before, like Wag Dodge facing the escape fire, or Captain Haynes flying a plane without controls, your past experience won't help you. Your intuition is useless. This is when you must rely on the creative, innovative power of your prefrontal cortex. You need to consciously think through the problem and invent a new solution. And finally, perhaps most importantly, always embrace uncertainty. The world is more random and unpredictable than our brains want to believe. It feels good to be certain, to pretend the argument in our head is settled. But that certainty is dangerous. It makes us ignore evidence that contradicts our beliefs. It makes us prisoners of our own preconceptions. Always force yourself to consider the other side. Actively seek out dissenting opinions. Continually remind yourself of what you don't know. The best decision makers aren't the ones who are always right. They're the ones who are best at learning from being wrong. That was a summary of How We Decide by Jonah Lehrer. We've certainly covered a lot of ground today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary like this is just the beginning. The real insights, the ones that stick with you, often come in the quiet moments when you're reading the book yourself. It's when a story hits you in a way you didn't expect, or a single sentence clarifies something you've been struggling with for years. This podcast is here to help you discover books worth your time. If anything we talked about today sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you understand the most important machine you'll ever own, your own mind. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, it would mean the world to us if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book here on Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.